Chapter 17, The Path to Freedom. Toilets? Maylie, Catwoman and Thomas and the cats were all staring up at me, puzzled. My brother Hercules, he saw them, I explained. To let signs. They shaped like flags on all the buildings next to where the thefts were taking place. And it's the exact same sign. White signs with 2 blue dragons. There was one on the platform where Paddington Bear was stolen, hanging above the old cafe, and lots on the flats next to the Children's Hospital and on the office buildings near Piccadilly Circus. What if that is the real sign of the invasion and everything else is just fake? Well, that makes sense, says Catwoman, tapping Zone 1 with her finger. This is prime real estate. The most expensive part of one of the most expensive cities in the world. The last thing any property developer is trying to do when they're renting out a building is to want a bunch of homeless people driving the prices down. Okay, so you stage some robberies of public property and you get the homeless people blamed for it, and then you get rid of the homeless people and people get driven out, said Thomas, nodding. Easy. And you're right, those signs, the ones with the blue dragons, they are everywhere. I see them all the time on my night rides. Maybe they really could be the missing link. Not just a head of hair, are you, Hector? Smiled Catwoman. I shrugged, and I gave a small smile back, pushing my hair away from my face. What about the to let signs? Asked Maylie, looking more confused than I'd ever seen her before. I don't get it. Wondering how a teacher's pet could possibly not get it, I explained everything in more detail. Her eyes slowly widened like 2 balloons being blown up as she finally understood. But why would an invading force blame homeless people for something like that? She asked as soon as I'd finished. Well, why not? Said Thomas. We can't defend ourselves and there's no one to fight for us. We're just a problem, remember? We're drunkards. We're drug addicts, apparently. We're beggars who people are really frightened of already. We're just sitting targets. Maylie shook her head, but that's horrible. They're blaming you for something you haven't done. The thief's got to be somebody with a lot of money and power to make all this happen, muttered Catwoman, and connections too. A property owner with buildings all over London would have loads of places to hide the statues. How are we ever going to catch them? Hold on. Flipping his map over, Thomas's finger ran down a small list of dates. See here, he said. I've been making a list of when the thief has been striking. Most of the time there isn't a pattern. Sometimes they'll strike 2 nights in a row and other times it'll be a whole week between the thefts. But there is one thing I've spotted. His finger jumped from one date on the list down to another and then a third. They have struck every Saturday since the thefts began, all at different times of the night. But today's Saturday, I said slowly. And we haven't got a clue about where he's going to strike next, this thief, or what time, added Maylie. We all fell silent. Then suddenly Catwoman pushed the cat that had been sleeping purrily on her lap onto the floor. Thomas, she exclaimed, the cross! Why did he use the sign of the cross by the stolen dragon at the courts? Thomas shrugged. Maybe he's getting bored and just scribbling any old sign now. Maybe it doesn't matter to him. Or, said Catwoman, her brown-green eyes shining, what if he's made a mistake? What if that sign was meant to be left at the next target? But what does the cross sign actually mean again? I asked. It's the one we'd leave at a church or at a place that has got something to do with a church, she explained. For example, we might leave that sign at the home of a priest. Maybe you're right, said Thomas. Maybe tonight the target will be a church, he sighed. But there are hundreds of churches across London, and plenty of them have got statues. We all crowded around the map, and we stared at it as if it might give us the answer. Are all the robberies all going from one side of London To this one? Asked Maylie, tilting her head and sliding her hand down from Paddington Station to the Royal Courts of Justice. Are they all mixed up and like jumping backwards and forwards? Thomas flipped his map over and then back again and counted things on his fingers. They've been jumping back and forth, he said finally, but only very slightly. The majority of the robberies have been moving down from the west to the east. Oh, good spot, darling, said Catwoman, giving Maylie's arm a little squeeze. I gave her a thumbs up too. And look, added Thomas, most of them have been along one main route. The longest night bus route there is. Yes, and the most expensive too, said Catwoman. It hits all the hot spots in London. We followed his finger as he traced a bright pink line labelled N15 that started at Paddington Station, ran down to Selfridges, past the statue of Anteros, went across Leicester Square and carried on past the Royal Courts of Justice. The only two places that had been left out were the thefts at Fortnum and Mason and Great Ormond Street Hospital, which were on the opposite side of the city to each other. Thomas's finger slowed to a halt as it reached a picture of a church on the line labelled St. Paul's Cathedral. No, gasped Catwoman. Well, might just be, said Thomas. It's the next major stop on the bus route. I doubt they'll be hopping on a night bus to get to their robbery, said Catwoman, shaking her head. Besides, they can't hit St. Paul's tonight. It's VE Day tomorrow, do you remember? They'll be having a choir concert tonight and a light show too. It'll be packed solid until at least gone midnight, and even after that the whole place will still be lit up. It would be madness. But that gives us a time, a window of when they might act, said Thomas. Yeah, and don't forget the thief has got that special remote control thing, I reminded them. I saw them. They turned every single light off with just one click. And imagine it, said Thomas, jumping up from his chair and starting to pace up and down excitedly. Imagine robbing St. Paul's Cathedral the night before VE Day. It would be a real coup, robbing one of the richest cathedrals with some of the most expensive statues in the world on one of the most important days in the world. Sounds like exactly the sort of thing this thief would do. And the public would be furious. If people weren't already scared and angry and ready to drive us all out before, they definitely would be blaming the homeless people after that. Well, that's if we're right, that is, interrupted Maylie. Should we tell the police? I said, hoping we'd figured it all out. If we had, we'd probably be heroes by tomorrow morning. I would have to share being famous with Maylie now, since she knew everything too, but I didn't mind. So long as everyone knew it was mainly me who'd helped to catch the thief. Now all the police had to do was go and watch the church and catch the real thief. Catwoman laughed. Tell the police? Oh, they'd never believe the likes of us, she said, gesturing to herself and Thomas. Or us, said Maylie, looking at me. We're just kids. They think we're making things up. Plus, they definitely wouldn't believe you. You've only just told them that Thomas was the thief. Thomas suddenly stopped walking and clicked his fingers with a loud snap. I've got a plan, he said. Providing we're right about this, of course. But I can't do it by myself. I'm going to need some help from someone brave enough and small enough to get through a very tiny window. Turning to me and Maylie, he swooped down on us like a human eagle and caught us each by a hand. Which one of you two will come with me, he asked, his eyebrows squeezed together tight, and help me to catch a thief? This is stupid, I muttered as me and Maylie hurried back down the alleyway and out onto the high street. It'll never work. He's mad. He's not mad, said Maylie. He's brave, and the plan is brave. You just have to be brave too and not mess it up. I glared at Maylie. It should have been her going tonight, not me, who had to share a bedroom with their grandparents anyway. How was that even allowed? Or maybe it was a lie so that she could get out of helping. Look, I'll come to yours before dinner, said Maylie, to give you the freedom pass. Don't ring the doorbell or anything, I ordered. My bedroom window, it's on the front of the house on the right. So just throw something up at my window and I'll open it up and you can toss it into me. Why can't I just knock on your door like a normal person? Asked Maylie. I can say you left something at the soup kitchen. No, I said, more loudly than I should have. I really don't want anyone. I stopped myself, but it was too late. Maylie stopped walking. You don't want anyone to see me? Is that what you were going to say? I wanted to tell her no, but I knew she'd know it was a lie. Because the truth was I didn't want anyone to see her at my house, especially not Helen, whose friends all had brothers and sisters who went to my school. If Katie and Will heard about it, they'd never shut up. Maylie's whole face turned red. Oh, forget it, she shouted. Then without another word, she turned back round and began walking off as fast as she could. I looked at her, wondering if she was still going to get me the freedom pass I needed, and wishing that I'd kept my mouth shut tight. The next chapter's called The Night Riders. When I got home, I was feeling so twitchy that I locked myself away in the room until tea time. As soon as that was over, I ran back upstairs and looked out of my window every few minutes to see if Maylie was coming. But she wasn't there at 6 o'clock, or 6:30, or 6:45. By the time my clock said 7, I was sure she wasn't going to come at all, which meant I wouldn't be able to help Thomas catch the thief, which meant nobody would know that I hadn't got Thomas in trouble on purpose. If, of course, the thief was even going to be at St. Paul's Cathedral and not somewhere else tonight. I sat down on my bed and I thought about what to do. If only I'd kept my mouth shut and not let Maylie know that I didn't want anyone to see me with her. But why did she care so much anyway? And why did I care so much? Tap! A stone hit my window and rattled down the slates of the roof over the front door. I jumped to my feet. Tap! Another bigger stone came hurtling to the glass. I ran open and threw open the large side window. Maylie was outside on the front gate, crouching behind a small garden wall. I waved and I smiled, but she didn't smile back. Taking something bright blue out of her coat pocket, she stood up and, looking around quickly to make sure no one was coming, she threw it as hard as she could up to my window. Thump! It hit the windowsill and fell straight back down into the garden. Covering her mouth with her hands to stop herself from squealing, Maylie crouched back down again. Before I could tell her that I would run down and get it, she squeaked open the front gate, grabbed the bright blue object and ran back out again. I leaned out of my window as far as I could without falling and waited. Maylie drew her arm back again. This time, the small flat parcel twirled through the air like a ninja dart and smacked me right in the face. Ow! I groaned, waving to show Maylie that I had caught it, but she was already gone. She hadn't even stopped to wish me good luck. Rubbing my face, I closed the window and opened up the blue wallet, and inside it on the left side was Maylie's granddad's freedom pass. So it's a bit like a bus pass that older people can have to allow them to go on the buses anytime they want. And it had a photo and a name and a date stamped on it. I stared at the photo, wondering how Maylie thought I could ever get away with pretending to be her 87-year-old granddad. For one thing, his face looked like melting wax, and his eyes were so droopy and long that they looked as if they were trying to reach the floor. And for another, he had shocking white hair all over his head. I was definitely going to need to wear a hat and a really long scarf and my puffer jacket. Opposite the freedom pass was a torn piece of paper tucked away inside the plastic, and it said, "Don't lose this. Good luck, Maylie." Snapping the wallet shut and putting it into my pocket, I snuck my winter puffer coat from the hallway, and I borrowed Dad's posh walking cap and his extra long stripy scarf from the hook on his bedroom door and stuffed them all into my rucksack, along with some chocolate bars just in case I got hungry. And when there was nothing left to do, I played my games until it was time for lights out. Mum and Dad always said goodnight at 9:30 and wanted our lights off by 10 when they were home. So I knew they would check for any lights under my door after then. Lying in the dark, I waited for the luminous hands of the clock to tell me it was 11 o'clock. The minute hand crawled its way along the clock face, slower than I'd ever seen it move before. 10:11, 10:15, 10:21, 10:23, 10:30. Oh, I could feel myself dozing off. I slapped my cheeks to try and wake myself up, and I pulled my eyes open with my fingers. There was no way I could fall asleep. Not tonight. 10:33, 10:40, 10:42. I could still hear Mum and Dad downstairs laughing at something on the TV. By 10:45, I couldn't wait any more, and I slowly crept out of bed, trying not to make the floorboards creak. I piled a heap of clothes under my covers of my bed and made its shape look like a long body, just like I'd seen them do in the movies. Then I pulled my overstuffed rucksack onto my back and I headed to the window. It was my only way out. The front door was too close to where Mum and Dad were, and chances were they'd already turned on the alarm for it anyway. The street outside looked quiet and empty, as if it was drowsy and half asleep too. I listened and waited. Mum and Dad laughed loudly again. Taking my chance, I quickly undid the latch, pushed open the big window. It gave off a really loud squeak, making me instantly pause and listen. There was no movement on the stairs, so after waiting another moment, I climbed onto the ledge, swung one leg out over and into the air. Sitting on the middle of the windowsill, I looked down. All I had to do was drop onto the little roof below me and then lower myself to the gravel below. Without making a single noise, it had looked easy in the daylight, but now the ground seemed to be so far away it might as well have been 17 floors down. But I thought of what Maylie had said. You just have to be brave too, and not mess it up. I'd show her. I gripped the side of the ledge and wriggled myself out and over and down. Clinging onto the last bit of the window with my fingers, I felt around with my toes for the roof below, but it was too far away. My legs were too short. I couldn't reach the drop. With a breath, I just let go, hoping the roof was only a short drop away. Thud, thump, crash, meow, crunch. I opened my eyes. I was lying on my back on top of my rucksack in the garden. I'd made it down all in one go. A light clicked on from behind the front door. I rolled myself at top speed into a shrub and I lay flat on my tummy, trying not to get any dirt in my mouth. The garden lit up as the front door swung open. "What is it?" Mum called from inside the house. At that moment, the cat I disturbed meowed again and someone from somewhere nearby. "Oh, it's just somebody's cat," Dad shouted back. And I heard the door shut and he went back inside. Whew! Feeling more grateful than I'd ever felt for the existence of cats, I waited for a few more seconds before rolling out of the shrub like a spy and making my way to the front gate. Wishing I could have brought my skateboard with me, I began to run as fast as I could to the main road, past the railings of the empty park. It was all locked up and shining in the moonlight like a playing field built for ghosts. Halfway down the road, I could see the light of a bus stop and the shape of an old man sitting underneath it. "There you are," said Thomas, getting up from the bright red plastic bench he'd been sitting on. Looking at me, his beard made way for a grin. "What happened to you? Trouble leaving paradise?" I looked down and realised I had 2 squashed slugs and a trail of dirt running all the way down the front of my hoodie. "Ugh!" I cried, jumping back and trying to get away from myself. "Hold still," said Thomas, chuckling, as he swiped the slugs away from me and he sent them flying into the night air like half-melted gummy bears. "Now hurry, the bus will be here in a minute. Malcolm is never late." Nodding, I quickly pulled up my puffer coat and Dad's scarf and hat from the rucksack and put them on. Thomas grabbed the scarf and twirled it round me like a giant piece of candy floss until everything on my face was covered except for my eyes. Said Thomas, stepping back to look at me. "You're not tall enough to pass for a grown man. Hunch your back right down as if you're looking for a penny on the ground." So I did what he said. Good. Now, keep that scarf high up around your face, and your hat, pull it down so low none of your hair shows. And that back, bend it right over and shake a bit when you walk. Think it might be the only way we can pass you off for an 87-year-old night rider, if no one looks too closely, that is," he frowned. "We're going to have to do something about your hair." He tried to push my floppy brown hair back underneath Dad's hat, but my hair was too slippery and long and the hat was far too small. "Sorry, lad. I think we're going to have to do a hat swap," said Thomas, taking off my dad's cap and plonking his yellow hat on my head instead. I promised my head I would clean it with disinfectant and the strongest shampoo ever invented as soon as this was all over. "Right, now, remember," said Thomas, as he helped me zip up my rucksack and put it back on over my bulky layers. "We've got 2 buses to catch to get to St. Paul's. When we're getting on, act sleepy. Look at the floor and just grunt when you show your pass. So have you got that? And whatever you do, do not make eye contact with the driver." As he talked, a big red bus appeared from around the corner, getting closer and closer until it eventually came to a halt in front of us. "Here we go," Thomas whispered. "Are you ready?" Before I could respond, the doors whacked open and a voice called out, "Hey, Thomas, you all right?" "Oh, Malcolm. Yeah, just, the normal chills," said Thomas, rubbing his arms as he climbed on board. "I've got a friend coming with me tonight. Come on, Mr. Zoo, up you get, you old timer." Coughing to pretend I was old and bending over like I was looking for an invisible penny, I climbed up onto the step of the bus. Getting out my freedom pass, I held it out, my eyes looking at nothing but the shiny grey plastic floor. "No need for that," said Malcolm. "Any night rider who's a friend of Thomas is welcome aboard my boat." And with a loud ding ding, he slammed the door shut and launched his bus boat deep into the pitch-black sea of the roads ahead. The next chapter is called Paul and the Midnight Mass. Sitting on the top deck, I watched as the headlights shone out like bright extra-large torches onto a road that was as black as the night sky. I couldn't believe I'd done it. I'd actually run away from home without getting caught, and I was now on a bus pretending to be an 87-year-old Asian man to go and catch a thief with a man whose trolley I'd drowned in a lake. It's like a strange dream. I could feel Thomas staring at me from his bus seat across the aisle. I glanced at him. He wasn't blinking, but he was stroking his beard. By the time the bus had reached the next stop, I couldn't take it any more, and I just asked, "What?" "Ah," he said, stroking his beard even slower. "Don't mind me. I tend to stare when I'm thinking. Right now, I'm thinking some mighty interesting thoughts about your being so eager to help me catch this thief. Despite appearances and all the things you've done, seems to me like you're not all bad." I went back to looking out the windows, but I felt my ears heating up under the layers of scarf. "I was also thinking about Mei Lee," continued Thomas, "and the soup kitchen. Catwoman tells me that you've been helping out there, but something tells me that you might not be going back after all of this is over. Maybe once you get a pat on the back and some of that reward money, you won't be thinking about helping Mei Lee out again, will you?" A burst of volcanic flame shot up through my chest, pulling the boiling hot scarf away from my face. I shouted, "You're wrong! I don't even know about any stupid reward money." "Really?" asked Thomas. "Are you quite sure about that, son?" "Don't call me son! I'm not your son!" I yelled before I could stop myself. As soon as the words left my mouth, I wished I could have caught them with a net and stuffed them all back in again. And Thomas became still for a few seconds, and then he looked away, nodding as he looked at his reflection in the window. I didn't mean," I stuttered, hating the way his silence was making me feel. Thomas put his hands up and looked at me with a smile that wasn't real, saying, "Forget it. Didn't mean to get so personal. Won't happen again." I stared at my hands as they gripped the railing in front of me. The bus had come to a second stop. We still had 6 more to go, and I wished it was all over already. A woman and a small boy wearing summer jackets but looking cold, thanks to the sudden coolness of the night, came up the stairs and went to sit right at the back. Thomas glanced at them and then turned back to me. Look, Hector, it's okay. I'm not really interested in your reasons for helping me do this. All I care about is that you don't hurt Maylee. She's been through enough as it is. What do you mean? I asked, forgetting I was angry and looking over at Thomas. What do you mean she's been through enough as it is? Thomas narrowed his eyes at me. Has Maylee ever mentioned her mum to you? Or have you ever asked yourself why she works so hard in the kitchen in school when she should be out being a kid? Have you ever thought why she's never brought a friend to the kitchens before you? I shook my head, not wanting to tell Thomas that I'd never once thought about any of those things, because Maylee was a teacher's pet, and I hadn't ever cared about anyone who was one of those before. Well, not enough to be their friend, anyway. Scooch up, ordered Thomas, as a large group of noisy men and women dressed in sequins and leather jackets all ran up the stairs, singing and shouting to each other. Oh, night rider's nightmare, he whispered as he came and sat next to me. The bus launched off again, and I waited for Thomas to explain. Have you ever heard of leukemia, Hector? I gave a single nod. It's a disease, isn't it? Yep, Thomas said with a sigh. Maylee's mum had it. Some people get better and some people don't. Maylee's mum didn't, and she died last year. Oh, I said, my nose beginning to tickle. I rubbed it hard and looked down at Thomas's old hands. A few months after she died, he continued, her dad decided they should move. He couldn't bear to live in their house without her, so he made Maylee and her grandparents move here. For Maylee, that meant leaving all her friends behind. She and her dad volunteer at the kitchen because her mum used to work for a similar charity back where they used to live, a charity that helped homeless women get off the street, women who just needed a bit of extra help. What, do you mean like Catwoman? Yeah, among many others. But how's she being helped if she's still on the streets, I asked, especially when she's so... I stopped myself, remembering that Thomas was old too. It's okay, you can say old, Thomas smiled. I nodded as the bus sped past a bus stop and gathered speed. For some people, like Catwoman, even though she's a grandmother and has... Hold on. Catwoman's got grandkids? I asked, feeling shocked. I'd never thought about anyone who was homeless having children or grandchildren. Oh, yes, said Thomas. She's got 4 of them, said Thomas, smiling. They're beautiful children. She's got photos of them inside her tent. So, but how come she's not living with them then? I asked as the bus juddered to a halt. We only had one more stop now. Why does she stay in her tent? Well, sometimes after a long time living a certain way, it's easier to stick with what you know, said Thomas. Back when she was young, Catwoman got bullied into doing some bad things and, well, she started believing that she was a bad person herself. She couldn't really go back to being herself again. People like Maylee's mum and everyone at the kitchen, they help hurt folks like Catwoman get back to being themselves. Slowly they help them to start remember good things and help them believe that they deserve good things too. But that can take years, and sometimes it's easier to stay with your cats and the friends you've got. See, we might not have much, but us homeless people, we've got each other. And if you don't have to say goodbye to that, then we really don't have a home. Ah, here we are. We're here, he said, pressing the button. And the voice on the bus announced, "Next stop, Aldwych." As the bus slowed down, I thought about Catwoman and all the people at the soup kitchen who needed to be taught how to remember who they were again, because they'd been bullied, and how they'd been made to forget all the good things about themselves, and how I didn't want to be someone who made people forget who they were. Come on, scarf up, Off we get, lad, whispered Thomas. Quickly now. Clambering down the stairs and waving goodbye to the driver, Thomas led me back out into the street. The air felt even cooler without the warmth of the bus, and I wrapped my dad's scarf around my face even tighter. Shouldn't be too long, said Thomas, leaning against the bus stop. Behind us, a woman with giant headphones on was half standing and half dancing as she was waiting for her stop. Spotting Thomas and me, she took a step away and turned her back to us. With the mud stains on my knee and my weird scarf and woolen hat, I remembered that I kind of looked homeless too now. I started to shiver. I moved my arms and legs and feet to try and make myself warmer, just as I was wondering if we were even going to make it to the cathedral before dawn. A bus rolled up then beside us, a big N15 glowing out at us from the front. The woman muttered, "Finally," and pushed past me and Thomas onto the bus. It made me want to stick out my leg and trip her up for being so rude to Thomas, but he held me back and he just let her pass. "Remember, eyes down, pass up and keep close behind me," whispered Thomas, before stepping onto the bus and showing his pass. I held up mine too, but the woman behind the wheel didn't seem to care and was driving away again before I even got on properly. "We'll stay down here this time," said Thomas, grabbing a seat next to the door. "It's just 3 stops now." I silently sat down next to him, right at the back of the bus in the corner. I could see someone half lying down on the seat, a coat covering up the top part of their body. London, it seemed, was full of night riders. A night rider is somebody that goes onto the buses just to stay warm and have somewhere safe to be. "Next stop, Chancery Lane." "Next stop, Shoe Lane." At each stop, the doors opened to let people off and let gusts of air blow in. I was feeling hot now that we were back on a warm bus wearing so many layers, and were glad we were sitting by the doors. Thomas had his eyes closed, and I wondered if he was thinking the same thoughts as me. Thoughts like, what were we going to do if we were wrong and the invisible thief never showed up? Or, what if they'd been and gone and we'd missed them completely? "Next stop, Ludgate Circus." "That's us," whispered Thomas. As the doors glided open, I shuffled out after him onto the empty street. Looming before us like a giant stone ship was St. Paul's Cathedral, except instead of being white and still, its whole face had been turned into like one big cinema screen. Constantly changing pictures of men and women in army uniforms flashed up onto the pillars and bricks and across its golden clock that told us it was 11:45. It was the VE Day celebrations, just like Catwoman had described. Grabbing my arm, Thomas pulled me behind the corner of a shop and whispered, "Let's keep a lookout from here for now. The concert had ended, so the cathedral should be empty. Keep your eye out for any strange movement. Remember, we don't know if they might try to take something from Queen Victoria's statue over there, or target something inside the cathedral. That's if we are at the right church, of course." I peeked around at the giant milky white statue of a woman with a golden crown on her head. She was carrying a stick and a ball, as if she was off to play rounders. Maybe this really was the place the thief would try and steal from next. He'd find it super easy to hang down from the Queen's neck to take all of her sports equipment. As we waited, I looked around to see if there were any lumps pretending to sleep in doorways that might suddenly start moving and wriggling like a human plant, but there weren't. There was only a couple holding hands and walking towards the cathedral on the other side of the street, kissing and giggling loudly. "Thomas, I think we might be at the wrong place," I whispered, tugging on Thomas's arm. "The traffic lights and building lights and everything, it's all working. Nothing's been switched off." But Thomas was looking up at the cathedral, grinning. "I think we're at exactly the right place. Look, up there. The light inside the cathedral isn't on." "What light?" Thomas pointed up to the second row of pillars that stood above the cathedral's giant doors. "Can you see the window up there?" he asked. "Well, it's always lit. In all my 20 years on the streets and on the buses, I've never ever seen it go a single night without that window being lit. Well, maybe they just switched it off tonight because of the VE show, I suggested. Thomas shook his head. That light wouldn't be switched off today of all days. It means it's meant to be a sign of hope to everyone who sees it. I think your thief is inside already, picking out something priceless to steal. What, even more priceless than the Queen's golden stick over there? I asked, wondering what could be possibly more expensive than an actual stick made of gold. Infinitely more, whispered Thomas, and we need to hurry. Come on, there's no one around now. Moving quickly, Thomas led me past a row of shuttered shops and up to an office building standing directly opposite the side wall of the cathedral and surrounded by a row of short black gates. Behind the gates, at the top of the stairs, next to a shiny black office door, was a golden sign with two swords crossed like an X, and the words Administration Offices of St. Paul's Cathedral stamped across it. Glancing round to check that we were still alone, Thomas opened the swinging gate, but instead of climbing up the stairs that led to the office, he turned to go down some steeper steps that looked as if they went to an underground cave. I followed him down, and we reached a smaller door with a small round window above it, and a much bigger window next to it. Thomas looked down at me. Do you think you can do it? It's the only way we can get in without being seen or setting any alarms off. I wanted to shake my head. It was a crazy idea. How was I supposed to fit in through that tiny round window? I was way too big, and that window was too small and high, probably not even open. But I thought of Maylie's warning that the plan was brave and would only work if I was brave too, so I gave a silent nod instead. Shh, wait, said Thomas, freezing. I froze too. On the pavement above us we heard footsteps ringing out. They crossed over the top of us and faded into the distance. OK, nodded Thomas, helping me take off my rucksack, my puffer coat and my dad's scarf. Keep the hat on, just in case, whispered Thomas, giving it a pat. Now remember, there is no alarm on the window because it's so small. Just push through gently, make sure you land safely, and then come and unlock the bigger window for me. Remember, you have to press the green button on the wall. If you don't press the green button, the alarm will go off. And when you try, and then when you get to the latch opening. OK, I whispered, too scared to say anything else. Brave lad, Thomas whispered back, handing me a small torch. Hoisting me up onto his shoulders, he balanced himself and me as I reached up and I touched the round window. Just like he'd promised, I swung inwards at the touch of my fingertips. I tried to pull myself up to the opening, but my body was just too heavy. Higher, I need to go higher, I whispered. Thomas groaned as he pushed me up, just high enough for me to be able to hook my arms inside the opening. Pulling my body through until only my legs were now sticking outside, I hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, I tipped myself forwards and landed with a thump and a half and a head roll onto the carpet below. It's a good thing Thomas had made me keep my hat on. Switching on the torch, I found the room on my right that led to the front windows, just like Thomas had described. Reaching the huge white curtains shielding the windows, I pulled them aside and I saw Thomas waiting outside, stroking his beard so hard it looked as if he was about to pull it right off. On seeing me, he gave me a thumbs up. I found the green button on the wall, pressed it, and then grabbing the latch, I slid the bottom half of the window up and open. Dumping his own coat and hat and rucksack outside, Thomas knelt and squeezed into the room like a shadow. Brilliant work, Hector. But you're never going to do this again, he said, patting my arm. This is the last time I'm going to let you break into a historic building. I grinned, wondering how many detentions Mr. Lancaster would give me if he could see me now. Now, are you sure you don't want to just wait here? Whispered Thomas. No, you promised I could help catch him. Are you sure? I nodded, like I'd never nodded in my life before. All right then, stick close. Leading me out into the corridor, Thomas stopped at a small wooden door under the stairs. He swung it open to reveal an empty cupboard. Hold the torch steady, he whispered, as he knelt down beside a large metal trapdoor that was built into the floor. just like he told us it would be. Remember, don't breathe in too deep. Short breaths until we get to the end, okay? It's important to keep your breath short and consistent to save air. It's not a long way to the cathedral, but it's underground and it's deep and it's slippery, and that can make it feel long. At least that's how I remember it from the days when I used to work in the archives team here. I was too excited to reply, and Thomas was too excited to wait for an answer. I held the torch as still as I could as he grabbed the metal ring and slowly lifted the trap door open. Beneath it was a short flight of stairs that went down into a pool of dark nothingness. "Here we come, Paul," promised Thomas as he climbed down into the hole and was quickly swallowed up by the tunnel below. As I followed him down, the walls and floors all around us began to tremble. St. Paul's clock was striking midnight, and his chimes were ringing out to tell the world that a new day was about to begin.